war itself is not a war, is not a crime. There is such thing as a just war. And what Israel is doing is, without a doubt, more just by every metric than any war that the United States has engaged in since World War II. Let's talk about what's going on here with the World Central Kitchen tragedy that's happened. There have been some new context or some new information that's come out about that event. And I think it bears going over, bears talking about, because it'll help us get a little better idea of whose side has the moral high ground here. Now, I want to ask you some questions to get started. The questions being, would you expect that in an actual full-on kinetic war that there would never be any friendly fire incidents? Would you expect that there would never be any mistakes in a war, that no friendly fire would ever happen, no civilians would ever be killed? If you believe that, you've just never been in a war. War is messy, it's dirty, it's lethal, it's incredibly lethal, and anybody that's around, anybody that is in the area of a war is going to be at risk. I've spent the last 21 years covering wars all around the world, and I can tell you that it's risky. There is some modicum of risk that you take, even being in the area where a war is. And that's just how it always works. And it doesn't matter. I mean, obviously, there's a difference in scale sometimes. The United States, typically, up to 20% of our casualties are attributable to friendly fire. That is what we call blue-on-blue incidents, where you're moving through a city, trying to clear a city, and there's some guys that are engaging in a firefight over here, and there's some stray rounds that end up striking their own guys that are working over somewhere else. It's very, very difficult to deconflict between friendly forces, and in this case, in the case of the World Central Kitchen, you're trying to deconflict between the military forces and some non-military forces, and you have a malevolent factor in the mix, which is Hamas, that the civilian forces are being forced to work with in order to do their jobs. Think about that. For the World Central Kitchen to distribute the aid that they were distributing in Gaza, do you imagine that they could have done so in areas where there are civilians without any contact with Hamas? Think about that. Hamas is specifically using civilian populations inside Gaza to hide among and to fight from. It's virtually impossible for anyone who is distributing aid to the civilian population to not have any contact with Hamas. And Hamas knows that, and Hamas is using that to their advantage. So my first question, do you think that there would be, in a war, that there could be a scenario where there is no friendly fire, there's no collateral damage? The answer is no. It's not possible. There has never been a war where there was no collateral damage. Number two, if there is collateral damage, what would you want a civilized country to have their military do in the case of something going wrong? Okay, when something goes wrong, would you want them to sweep it under the rug? Would you want them to, say, we meant to do that? No. All right, so what I was talking about was, would you want a civilized military? What would you want them to do in the event that there was a mistake? In the event that there was some civilians killed, or there was some collateral damage? What would you want them to do? Well, I would want them to do an investigation to find out the facts. And I would want them to take steps to make sure that this never happens again and that the military is incentivized to make sure it never happens again. Now, the reality of being in the military is that whenever something goes wrong, somebody has to be held accountable. I mean, that's just how it goes. Someone has to be held accountable when there's a mistake. And so that's normally the commander. That's just kind of how it works. I mean, the commander very likely might not have even been there when the mistake was made, but he's the buck stops at his desk. If he's the one paying the price, they're going to have to fire some people, and that's exactly what they did. Now, let's talk about it for a second. This is from Manny Fabian, who's an Israeli journalist, lives in Beersheba. He's very good. I follow him on Telegram. He says, 2 senior officers will be removed from their roles and several other top commanders in the Israel Defense Forces will be formally censured. That means their careers are over, basically, for their involvement in the deadly drone strike against a group of aid workers with the World Central Kitchen organization in the central Gaza Strip earlier this week. Now, I asked you those questions before I read that because I want you to understand that this may mean, the fact that they are firing people does not necessarily mean that they're admitting that all of this was all their fault. They're firing people because somebody needs to be made to pay as a deterrent, as a motivator for for the next time, right? And if nobody's made to pay, then there's no incentive for them to get better. This is how it works in the military. But it does not necessarily mean that they're saying that this is 100% our fault. Now, there's some more information that has come out about this, and I put this context up on my locals page. So if you go to chuckholton.locals.com, you can just go to chuckholton.com. It'll take you to the same place. But I put this up on there, and so I want to go through these point by point. The IDF revealed that Hamas purposely drew fire to the World Central Kitchen convoy. At around 10 p.m., the IDF noticed suspicious activity as the WCK vehicles joined a convoy of other Hamas vehicles. Now, that in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that the World Central Kitchen guys were Hamas operatives or anything like that. Like I said, they cannot distribute aid in the entirety of the Gaza Strip without interfacing at some level with Hamas. That Hamas still is around enough that they're going to have to do that. Okay, so the fact that there were some Hamas vehicles that were, around in the area, that's just part of the war. It's part of the fog of war. All right. Hamas terrorists then climbed onto and into the World Central Kitchen trucks and fired several times indiscriminately into the air to ensure the IDF would see them. That's a little bit of a stretch. I mean, it's not necessarily a stretch, but a journalist has to look at this and go, okay, these guys fired indiscriminately into the air. Why they did it, we don't know. But it certainly did ensure that the IDF would see them if they started shooting into the air. And it's likely that the terrorists knew that when they did it. The convoy then split up, and part of it entered a hangar, where it became impossible to tell which vehicles were inside, whether it was all World Central Kitchen vehicles or all Hamas vehicles, because they all entered this hangar, and there were vehicles coming and going from the hangar all the time, apparently. This is new information now. This is something that we didn't know before. The IDF attempted to call the World Central Kitchen workers and the World Central Kitchen headquarters on 2 separate occasions to confirm whether or not they were with the Hamas convoy, but nobody answered. Okay? Now that's a big deal. That is huge. I mean, what? Wait, we weren't told that before. We were told that the World Central Kitchen convoy had deconflicted with the IDF before they left on their late night convoy. I mean, why do you have to do a convoy at 11 o'clock at night? That's kind of suspect anyway, right? But, okay, so it happens. They called, they deconflicted with the IDF, told them, okay, this is the route we're taking, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, this is what we look like, right? And then they went on their convoy. But when there was some confusion about, wait a minute, we're following all these vehicles, and there's some Hamas vehicles and some World Central Kitchen vehicles, and they're going like this, and they're driving together for a while, and then they enter a building where we can't see what's going on, and then some vehicles, now these were white Toyota Land Cruiser SUVs. Do you know how many what percentage of the vehicles in Gaza happen to be white Land Cruiser SUVs? I would say that is probably one of the most common vehicles in Gaza, point, period, end of story. In any war zone, the white Toyota Land Cruiser SUV is pretty much ubiquitous. Every aid agency, that's what they use. The United Nations, that's what they use. Every ambulance is typically a white Land Cruiser. And many times, important people use those Land Cruisers as well, because they're very durable. They're very good in non-permissive environments, bad roads and stuff like that. They're ubiquitous, so they're easy to get parts for, right? Yeah, I myself have a 2019 Toyota Land Cruiser 75 series troop carrier that I bought as an ambulance, as a private ambulance here in our little town in Panama, and because it's a great off-road vehicle. Connie and I go camping in it sometimes. It's just a great all-around off-road vehicle. So they're just very, very common in that area. So for some of those vehicles to have been, maybe other white Toyotas that then mixed with the white Toyotas of the World Central Kitchen, and then they all go into a hangar where the drone can't see them anymore, and then some come out the other side, you can understand why there would be some confusion about who's who and who are those guys, which one has those guys that were carrying weapons and shooting in the air, because we want to kill those guys. We don't want to kill the other people. So they tried to call the World Central Kitchen on the phone, on the radio. They tried to get in touch with them 2 different times, and they got no response. So, and this is where I would say that the mission kind of went wrong. The people in charge. Now, one more thing. There was an hour gap between when these vehicles entered the hangar and when they exited the hangar. Okay, so again, there were lots of vehicles going into this hangar and other vehicles coming out of the hangar, and they just mistook them for the wrong vehicles, terrorist vehicles. So it wasn't that they didn't know that there was going to be some people delivering aid out there, but they were all mixed up, and an hour went by, some of the vehicles left. They were driving, again, late at night, and the stickers that they had on their rooftops were probably not visible from a drone. because they weren't, I mean, look, the military has infrared strobes that they give to the soldiers, and we put them on our vehicles, we put them on our helmets. There was one time, I think I mentioned this in a previous live, where we used to, back in the day before we had infrared strobes, we had what we called glint tape. This infrared reflective tape. That's just like you see the reflective vests that, road workers wear or something like that. They have the silver stripes on them that reflect very brightly at night when they get hit with light. This is the same concept, except it only reflects infrared light, and so the only people that are going to notice that reflection are people that are looking through night vision goggles, because night vision goggles can see in the infrared spectrum, right? So we had this infrared reflective tape that we wore on our left arm when we were here in the invasion of Panama. And so what happened was, we were out, I got sent out on today's military has ways of telling who the good guys are on the ground. What they do is they have an infrared strobe light that goes on top of the vehicle or goes on top of the some soldier's helmet, something like that. And the IDF did not provide any kind of infrared strobe or marking devices for the NGOs that were working in the area, okay? They could have, but they chose not to. They didn't do that. And that was an oversight on their part. They really should have done something more to be able to tell friend from foe when it comes to that. But again, the information that's coming out shows that Hamas was intentionally using the rules of engagement and the deconfliction pathways that the NGOs had with the IDF to create chaos and to set the IDF up to make a mistake like this. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. They were, the IDF made some missteps here, no question about it. And they are taking steps to rectify those missteps. But the new information that's come out is that Hamas is using the good graces of the IDF to even allow aid agencies to deliver aid into Gaza, where they know their enemies are taking that aid and taking advantage of it. They are using those rules of engagement in order to try to move public opinion against Israel, in order to, because again, that's their best weapon, in order to try to win the war. And it was effective. Look, Hamas has lost more than 10,000 of its troops on the ground. Hamas has lost at least 95% of their capability to make war. They're not 100% down, and they're not out yet, but they are down. And if the IDF continues the fight, the IDF will succeed at destroying Hamas's ability to make war. They may or may not succeed at destroying Hamas itself, because Hamas is more of an idea almost. But they will make it very, very difficult for Hamas to present a military threat to Israel. Okay? War itself is not a crime. There is such thing as a just war. And what Israel is doing is, without a doubt, more just by every metric than than any war that the United States has engaged in since World War II. Now, I'm not saying that the U.S. wars were not just. I'm just saying that by every metric of a just war, this war from Israel is more just than any war the United States has taken part in since World War II. And that comes from somebody who served in the U.S. military and has covered every war since World War II. No, not since World War II, although it looks like it. No, I've covered every war since the beginning of the War on Terror in 2001. And the problem with what Israel is doing now by pulling troops out of Gaza, I mean, it's hard not to draw a line between what happened with the World Central Kitchen and the IDF pulling out of Gaza all but two brigades. They had 23 brigades in Gaza at one point, at the height, and now they have 2. So, matter of fact, I have here a map. This is from 2023 Gaza War on Twitter that shows where the IDF troops are now and where they have been. So if you look here, the light gray shows where the IDF cleared places where they had taken and they have now withdrawn from. And the black areas are the areas where the IDF is still, where they still control. So look how little of Gaza is actually under IDF control right now. Now, this goes completely against the media narrative, which makes it sound like Israel is in there with an iron boot on top of the necks of every person inside Gaza. I showed this video today on the CBN live that I did. This is a video from Deir al-Balah, which is right in the center of Gaza, right where the W is, where it says Wadi as-Saika, whatever that says right there. Let's see if I can make that bigger. Wadi as-Salka. Okay, so right about where the W is, that's where Deir al-Balah is. And here's a video from there this last Friday. Get ready to see lots of rubble. Get ready to see lots of destruction and death. Watch this. Thank you, Donna. Oh, wow. Look at all these starving Palestinians. They're all so hungry. Look at them. Look at, there's a fat guy walking by. Some of these people, you tell me how many of these people look like they're starving, starving to death right now. There's food in the marketplace. They've got soap. Look at all the rubble in the background. You see all that rubble back there? Look at all the rubble. Look in the background, the big piles of rubble. That's pretty well organized rubble, actually, come to think of it. There's a jewelry store back there. This is the marketplace out here. This is the marketplace in Deir al-Balah. Look, what we just saw right there. I'm going to back it up a little bit. Those yellow cans on the left, that's baby formula. That's Nido. So anyway, bottom line is this new information, while it doesn't completely exonerate the IDF from the drone strike on the World Central Kitchen, it does give us some more context. And that context is important. And I hope that what you've been able to get out of this very choppy podcast, which I'm recording this, by the way, so I'll clean it up and I'm going to re-upload it in high quality onto my website later, so you'll be able to watch it without all the glitches if you want. So the point is, I hope that this podcast has given you some context so that you can understand a little more about the challenges of operating in a theater of war, about the sort of inherent conflicts of interest between these NGOs having to work with the enemy and work with the friendlies at the same time. I mean, these guys have a very difficult job. I've done this with the Free Burma Rangers. Like you have to deconflict with the good guys and the bad guys at times. And that's very, very difficult. So, they're doing a dangerous job. Obviously, we should do whatever we can to try to allow these NGOs to get in there and to give aid to the people who need it. But I think it is important to show, again, contrary to the media narrative, we've got lots of food in the market. The IDF is only in the areas that are black here. Okay, that's the only place where the IDF has troops right now. And that's a pretty big deal. That is very instructive. If nothing else, it's instructive on how dishonest and disingenuous many in the media are when they are specifically making it sound much worse than it actually is. All right? So that's what I wanted to say today. I really appreciate all of you who watch. I appreciate all of you who send me emails and support. Go to chuckholton.com. You can subscribe over there and even support monthly if you want to. We're trying to do the best we can here and keep it going. So again, I will upload this video to my website without all the glitches, and you can watch it or share it if you like from there. And so thank you again for everything, everybody being online here. That's all I got for today. So God bless you. We'll see you again later. Bye-bye.